Let's start with our to-do list for next time because it's there. Just more of the same. I mean, not more of the same. We're doing different things, but rhetorical précis. We're starting with reading graphs, maps, and trees, and we're going to continue that next time. So those of you guys who are in group, come on. Those of you guys who are in group one will do another chapter and look at the Zotero group library for the rhetorical précis to see which chapters have been covered already, so that we don't recover those. I mean, I think there were just so many chapters in debates in the digital humanities. It was less likely that we were going to overlap, but since there are a lot fewer, we want to make sure we don't do that. So next week, those of you guys in group one will do your reading graphs, charts, something else like that. There we go. Trees. Okay. So you guys will be doing that. And then we've got the readings for next time. We're going to be reading maps, graphs, damn it, graphs, maps, trees for next time as well. So that'll be three weeks on it. It's just 100 pages, but it is so bloody dense, isn't it? Oh, so I'll have some words to say. I mean, I guess we'll all have words to say. Well, I'll have nice words to say that I hope will be productive, and we can expletive if we need to when Adeline's in bed. But we are probably going to be talking mostly about graphs, maps, and trees today, which will leave not enough time for the emergence of the digital humanities, which I hope to get to some. But we will spend most of our time next time on the emergence of the digital humanities. And I think that conversation, as it needs to, will slip into, it's just one that's going to keep informing us. So since we haven't had a sustained discussion of this, then I think it should continue. Reading machines is also really dense, and it starts with some mathematical equations. So I will, before we get into that, try to ease you guys into that because it can be intimidating. But it is also really interesting once we get into it, as I think graphs, maps, and trees is. So so that's that going on. And then check to see who's presenting. We've got Brian's going to present on Cyberpunk Project. Yeah. Cyberpunk Project. And Katie, what are you presenting on? You already sent me your presentation. What is it?
It's staging Shakespeare. It's like digs deeper into staging of Shakespeare.
Okay. Hey, Joyce. All right. So let me close some stuff here. To-do list. Okay. So check if you're presenting for next time, and then those of you guys who are presenting, I'm grateful to see you guys putting those in Zotero, because we'll have look at our entries. We're at 234 now, guys. Look at that number, just go. But if you will also put your DH presentation step here, as you guys have, so that especially if you have like a screencast, so that people, as they are preparing for their final project, can get at those ones that they know a little bit more about, and then they can dabble around in other places like your 20 entries folder for other things. And then what else? So please put that there, and I think that should do it. Okay. Are you doing your blogs? Let's see, number 5. Blogging, you got your 20 entries going, and if you aren't here in this room or live streaming, then the other stuff that you need to do with your pre and posts. Tuesdays. And then for those of you guys who are in the future, who are wanting to know what a good model post for in response to, and we have several that are really good, in response to the recording Here's one from Kendall from week 3. We need to remember to put an Easter egg in, but I love that Joyce knows the meaning of Easter eggs. She's like, I don't know if it's like, I don't know, do we need to say something about Marvel, or am I just married to the wrong guy? So yeah, we need to do something like that for our folks. So, but not right now. It's got to be towards the end. So they got to get to the end for our post-credit stuff. All right. A little bit of help from Stephanie. I'm going to go back to something else that she said, and a great help from Brian. I love all this collaboration. If you're having difficulty with Zotero, she said that she's found this series of videos really helpful. There's tons of them. Yeah. So if you want to know the hell out of Zotero, but I mean, it can do a lot of stuff, and she's been using it for a couple of years, and she's really found it to be really helpful. So she finds these tutorials to be really helpful. And then she recommends for finding DH projects. I do too. This is where I found Mapping Islamophobia and How to Rob a Bank. These are some winners. You may have already found this yourselves, but they've got them all going all the way back to 2012. And they don't always have the fun ones that like the How to Rob a Bank, but often they do. So that was from blogs. So I'm keeping up with your blogs. I'm going in and I'm responding. I see you guys are responding. I'm seeing some good conversation there. This is what we're going to be doing then. I'm going to talk about, Stephanie's got a final project idea. I want to talk about some more of you guys' final project ideas. I tweaked the assignment sheet to have a little more flexibility because I had no idea you guys were going to be so damn ambitious, which I'm very excited about it. Wanting to come up with wireframes and so forth. So this is really exciting, and it sounds like you guys are excited about the possibility of really making something that will really help serve you, which is what we want all this to do. And I've got some stuff on graphs, maps, and trees to share with you, including how bizarre this Morietti fellow is. That is going to be delightful. Joyce is here. She can talk to us about her visualization tool. And then there's a linked women pedagogies, or pedagogues, tracing women's intellectual work in rhetoric and composition that I've been wanting to share with you guys. We probably won't have time. And then get to the emergence of the digital humanities if we can. Before we do those final things, this linked women pedagogues and talking about emergence of the digital humanities, I'd like to try to get back to some of those pending debates in the digital humanities rhetorical crises, though we might not end up getting there with all the technical issues and so forth. So if those are in Zotero, we'll have access to them and you guys get full credit for them. So we'll come back to that in a second. But before I blab on any more, I would love to start your digital humanities presentations. And so since we have Greg here, do you want to go ahead and get started?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
Well, could I just navigate through here?
Yes, yes. Oh, and who else do we have? We have Bob, and who's in the bottom?
I don't know.
I can just barely see you. Who's it's Peter. Peter. Oh, hello, Peter. There. Now you're all lit up. Hi. Hi. Okay. Excellent. All right. I'm ready.
You ready?
I'm ready. You guys ready?
Well, I feel like I abandoned Abigail because she and I hang out 2 nights in a row over there on that end of it. And I feel like we're over in the Brady Bunch with all the screens there, set up. So I feel like Pinocchio and I came to life, and I'm real and I'm here. And so I'll say that. First of all, I stumbled across this website that this gentleman created, this professor created, and I'm going to go into it. I'm going to show you kind of the bits and pieces of it, but and why I think it is why I chose it for my digital humanities project. But first, as I was, I shared with you guys last week that I kind of like that Western theme. You know, I just really get into the pulp westerns, and I'm just a huge Zane Grey fan. And as we were going, I thought, you know, gosh, you know, how the heck do I search this thing? So I get it, and I get on my computer, and of course, you can guess how I started searching. Zane Grey, Digital Humanities, right? Because I don't know what the heck else where my starting point is. And I start searching and trying to figure out something that I can get going on there. And I stumbled across this. This actually came up, and I'll show you why here in a minute, why it came up under Zane Grey. But I completely left that. I thought this was so cool. And I may embarrass myself in a minute because you guys may have already known all this stuff that I'm about to talk about, but I had no idea. So I just stumbled across it and thought, man, this is awesome. How, you know, everyone can utilize this. So let's just talk about it. So, you know, this is this Ben Smith's kind of a web page, and it goes through here. But what I wanted to focus on is, let's see if I can find it, this Hathy Trust collection. So I'm going to click on it, and I'm going to come back and go through this, how it relates to digital humanities. When I click on this Hathy Trust, basically this is this organization is kind of like a partnership where you have different colleges join together, and they digitize and they share the digitized collections. And you can get on here and you can check things out from, you know, I don't know, I think the guy mentions that they have 15 million works on here. But really, I think when I last checked, it was like up to 16 million works. And it reminded me, and I want you to think about when we were reading maps, graphs, and charts there, where he talked about you got to quit reading and start mapping and charting and graphing things. And you're going to see that's exactly what they do here, okay? So first of all, when I stumbled across this, it said that they have all these old books and novels and everything else that they've started to digitize and form a collection on. And in doing so, I thought, well, you know, I am an Ella Wheeler Wilcox fan, and she's a poet from the 1800s, and I thought there's no way they have that on here. You know, I have several of her first edition poetry books, and I thought, well, let me just click this in here and see. There's one, Poems of Passion, and when I click this, it should pull up, and all these books have been digitized, and this is a first edition here, and you can pull up and check it out. And I just think that's amazing that there's this resource here that you can pull up for all these digital archives that, you know, you would never think would exist. So aside from that, let's see if I can get back to it. So you can go and check out all those deals, but what this guy does is he goes through and explains. So if you were to click on this link that I have posted, and I think you would have a lot of fun playing with it. So when you go through here and you scroll down, you see like this scattering, this scatter plot here of information. And it's kind of neat. If you go to the right, if you go to the left, it does one thing, and if you go to the right, it does something else. So I'm going to go to the right just for a second. Let me scroll, and you can pull it. And this is not the entire. I think this is like 15,000 examples of the 15 million things that they have. It becomes interactive if you come over here, and you can click on these books, and if you zoom in, you know, it kind of gives you a different look at it. And it's organized according to the Library of Congress, and they have it so if it's over in one area, so this is, I think, an example of what Moretti was saying about mapping and different things. So if you click on one area over to the right, it's it may be under a language, a certain language, it may be under a certain topic, or so on and so forth. So, you know, you see like this one's the short title's Hard Cash. It was written in 1868, and it's in English And then you see the works of Robert Louis Stevenson, 1922.
And they're organized by the Library of Congress number. Is that what you said?
Yes, ma'am.
So it mimics going through the stacks.
Yes, ma'am.
Isn't that the best part of it, right? That's finding stuff on the stacks that are near things that I really want. That's yeah.
So this guy, he does, I can sit and explain it, but this guy does a really good job kind of showing, and I think it'd be pretty neat here. He says, now when you leave here and you go off to the left, they go through and they kind of give you a tutorial of it. And it says, we start with a fragment that covers the entire corpus with 10,000, 61 out of 137,000 books visible, the rest hidden until we zoom in. So I won't read all of it, but I'm going to kind of scroll through. And then you see the dates. You see how the dates pop up of all these things that are posted there. And it says, in this case, there clearly is time. A line drawn from the east to west to the middle of the central cluster will run neatly from present to past. And so it's kind of divided up into time, but for time purposes, I just kind of want to touch on it and show you guys. While time structures the overall view, this isn't simply the circle. There are many islands and peninsulas. And so what got me hooked here was, as I was looking for Zane Grey, this came up because he had mentioned there's an island and peninsula of Zane Grey works, and it had it all there. And so I can click on and check it out, and where does it fall in, and how does it interrelate with the other books that are written during that time period. And I just played with this for probably 2 hours, just before I started thinking, wow, maybe I should use this for my project itself. And then of course it says you can, at any time, you can interact with the bottom on interact button on the top of the screen to zoom and pan around and so on and so forth. And of course I shared with you, you can move this around here. If it's over to the right, you can move it. When it comes to the left, it starts going back. So you can just kind of, what's here, And so I think that's pretty neat. And it says the far south field is the islands that tend to be associated with a single author. And then, of course, they show that. And you see the author's names popping up. And then here's where the Zane Grey came in that I shared with you. These exist all over the peripheries of the chart. For some authors, like Western novelist Zane Grey, the clustering is nearly perfect. Almost every work he wrote is in this cluster, and no other authors intrude. For others, it's more complicated. So during this time, his style of writing kind of stood by itself. And you see, and then you can kind of see the short title, Finding Caravans, and the subject, and so on and so forth. So I just think it's awesome. There is one island that appears not to be composed by a single author, located between Daudet and Tolstoy. And you kind of see how these are clustered here, and Tolstoy there. If we switch the labels, so it becomes what unifies these works. They're not clearly fiction at all. For some, it's pretty clear what's going on. Books of the 19th century women clothing show up in a classification model Underwood uses. Has learned that minute descriptions of clothing highlight characteristics, aspects of novels. Anyhow, and then you see the fashion and costuming and the books that come up from that. Of course, you see the Conjuring and whatnot over here. Anyhow, let's scroll through just a few more things here. The impact, controlled access highways on population growth in non-metropolitan communities, 1940 to 1970. So the reasons for miscalculations are less clear. What seems fictional about this, and some people tend to view mistakes like this as inherently calling the whole process of automatic classification into question. So, when they go through and classify it, but some things it tends to, is it a mistake? Is it not a mistake that they classify this thing here? And you see when it starts jumbling together, but you can still see like how works kind of fall outside of, and they have the little peninsulas and islands that they talked about. Let's see, 3 main peninsulas sticking down from here from the west are literatures from East Asia, South Asia, and Russia. How their works come out. Northwest regional American literature. A lot of Los Angeles and San Francisco rather than India and Korea. And then within the modern American literature genre, distinction or powerful, even as author clusters remain. Danielle Steele occupies a cape of her own in popular literature. And then you see the Danielle Steele, you click on, get information about her books. And then, of course, they talk about gay erotica here. And
Wow.
so I just, I just thought this was just neat. Like I said, I didn't know it existed. Y'all may already know about this, but I did not. And I'm sure that there's a way you can go through and pinpoint what you're looking for. And as long as it's available for public domain, you can go through, like what I showed you, you can go through the Hattie Trust, and you can search for those things. How valuable is that? We go through and we can't find something at our, when we're trying to find a journal or trying to find a book or something. Well, here it is electronically, from way back when that someone has had, and they digitized it. And they've been doing this for, I guess, a few decades now. And you can just imagine what that's going to look like as they continue to. Of course, it's never ending. They'll never get caught up. And what I think is pretty neat, I think Jennifer Mims, did I get that right? Jennifer, you had posted something on your blog, and I responded to it today, where you talked about the digital things that you find digitally, they change at the speed of light. And already, just in working with this for a week or two now, I've already seen changes that have gone on as I've looked through there. So I thought that was an interesting point that Jennifer made. So
Very cool.
That's it.
That's very cool. Thank you.
All right, absolutely. I don't know if you want me to click off.
No, that's okay. I got it. We want to take another look. That's amazing.
It's pretty neat.
And definitely well timed with us looking at graphs, maps, and trees. Oh yeah, it looks like giving Greg an applause. I was too stunned by the project. Jennifer, do you want to say anything about this before I just hit play? I know you did this because you weren't going to be here. Oh, I'm talking to you this.
Oh, yeah, I was just going to say that, yes, everything seems like it changes at the speed of light. I know that, I guess our first RP we did where I forgot the name of the book, but it was online, and what was the name of that book?
The Debates in the Digital Humanities.
Yes. I did the one about archaeology in the big tent, and how, archaeology is not really very well covered in the DH, but how old is that book? Was it?
Oh, that project?
Yeah.
This one that I just showed?
Yeah, well, I meant first the book, like that article that I did. Do you remember?
Oh yeah, 2016,
Yeah,
somewhere around there.
Yeah, okay. And then, how old's your project, Greg?
They've been working on it for a couple of decades.
Oh,
but the guy who is a professor, I can't remember where he's a professor from, but he goes in and changes and does different things on his show.
Right.
I don't
Updates. So I was like, ever since that turned on in my mind that, okay, there's a problem connecting archaeology with the digital humanities. It's, I guess, because I wouldn't have really noticed it without this, but everything I find now is archaeological because I'm trying to stick with this old English Beowulf theme to enhance, I'm trying to pick things in this genre because it will actually, really help me teach this better. So I'm just, I'm finding pictures of, bones and helmets and whatever. So as far as this electronic Beowulf 4.0, yes, I'm glad I did it over this site because it's specific. But now I have, just a couple of days ago, found even better sites that have everything, at all about Beowulf that has ever happened. And there's a link to this in it, but it would just be too much to cover probably right now. So, I could go on and on. Like he said, I could study this for hours. I was so stuck in there and the little, click on this now and click on that. So
The sun comes up and
yes.
yeah. What are those things that you found? Are those links in your 20 entries?
Yes. Yeah,
Okay.
it's called. I did it late last night. It was called Beowulf Resources, maybe, but
Okay.
I was actually mad that it's there because that's what I wish my project could be over. But this lady has totally stolen the entire. There is nothing else unless I met Beowulf himself that I could put in. You know, I don't have any way of doing that. So yeah. So here's my old video from a couple of weeks ago.
Electronic Beowulf is the site I'm going to show today. Here I have a PowerPoint. This gives accessibility to Beowulf translations, and this is why.
Oh, sorry.
Recently, Navarro College's British Literature 1 textbook changed, and this new edition included an updated version of Beowulf. However, the change was not of benefit to the class because there's no longer a map at the beginning. The translation is different. So, of course, my notes and tests are also different. And it's lacking much of the media, pictures of related artifacts that the other text included. Thankfully, there's such a thing as digital humanities. All I need and more to enhance the students' understanding of Beowulf is just a click away. For translation purposes, and to show how the language has evolved since the time of Beowulf, there's not a better site than Electronic Beowulf 4.0. This site also includes a full bibliography of Beowulf curricula. So I go here, and I have this open already, but I'll come here. It looks like this, and it's edited by Kevin Kiernan. Anglo-Saxon versions and poems, Beowulf, Judith. So I can just click into this and access translations of Beowulf. Here students could, see different words and features, and the really neat thing about it is all the extra pieces that this has in it. The transcript here, views, search, which edition you'd want, and then just here I can go to different lines and see the different editions and what they might say in their original form. I also wanted to show this part of this site. It's the going online aspect of it. I'll just open this just in case. It gives links to other online having to do with Beowulf, how to study it, viewing options. So really the best part here is the translation. There's definition, what the words mean, the grammar and how a student might use it, the glossary, how to access that, meter, line numbering, and then the critical edition, all the different restorations, Thorkelin, editorial, conjectural, and then just everything you can see here. Keys for the transcript, how to read it, the key for the edition, and the last thing that I thought was really beneficial to students is this gigantic bibliography of a lot of the Beowulf curricula. Huge asset to students. Just this, everything from 1990 to 2012 here that students could use to further their study. So anyway, this is a site that I'm definitely going to use and I found very helpful in the world of digital humanities. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you. Pass, Jennifer.
Yes.
Excellent.
Okay, so I glossed over this. Do you guys have questions for either Greg or for Jennifer on their projects?
I noticed on when you were showing the text of Beowulf, it had a play button. Does somebody read it in the Old English? Or?
Oh yeah, I wondered that too.
Okay, now that I've seen all these other sites, I don't remember if that one reads it, but some of them do. And I have all of this stuff added in my library.
With lots of notes, it's really useful.
Yes. I hope so, but I don't remember. I don't think that site does, but I could be wrong, and I don't remember.
There was a play button, but yeah.
Yeah, and if it did, it was maybe it did. But again, I made that like 2 weeks ago, and since then I feel like I've found better stuff. So
that is going to be the constant fight. Okay, that is, you know how it happens when you're working on a paper when you work on your dissertation, you work on your thesis.
Mm-hmm.
Everything that is ever good about the topic that you're exploring has already been done and done better. And so why don't I just throw myself in a river? And if that happens in print, when print is, we're working on, we're just submitting the final stuff for a book that we got a contract for a year and a half ago. So, I mean, and then that's sort of fast. But in the digital humanities, oh, hell. And, anyway, yeah.
Yeah.
The other questions?
Greg, yours just looks really addictive. Like, I'm afraid to look at it. It was time.
It ate up a lot of my time too. It was fun though. It was a blessing too, because I had no idea where to start. Now I thought I was going to go one direction, stumbled across that pretty quick and said, no, this is it. This is what I'm going to talk about, because if I'm enthralled with it, maybe somebody else will be too.
Yeah, absolutely. And so just to make sure I understand, they're sorting all of this data based on the subjects that the Library of Congress gave the text when it was put in the library.
So they have it divided up into different sections. We just look at pieces of it. So they do it by like language.
Okay.
And then they do it by like there'll be a literature section.
Okay.
There'll be like not just what we might think of English literature or something like that. They also have other books like science books.
Well, I think it's. I think what I understand is it's based on what the Library of Congress has tagged as the subjects.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yes,
So,
ma'am.
So which that is interesting because it's controversial by itself too, and
Right.
some things get tagged as. Maybe there's a reason why Zane Grey has an island by himself. It's not literature. I don't know. It'd be interesting to see.
It would be. And then too, one of the things that they brought up is what's missing. So this is what people from, I can't remember. There's an alliance of academic alliance of a group of colleges that use this and submit to that, and also something out in California. But so what they find to be important to put in there, what have they left out to be missing? What makes the cut to get over there?
Every archive is an act of privilege.
Yes.
Okay, so
I think I started.
no, please.
Pipe in late, but I sit there thinking. I think I shared with you, like I have some Ella Wilcox first edition poetry books from the 1800s. And as I'm going through here, I'm thinking the first one that I got, I was so scared to open it up because it's old and you don't want to mess the pages. So I went and I said, well, I want to read this in this entirety. So I remember going to the local university and getting it on microfilm and printing it off where I can read it without messing up this first edition book. And now, here it is. I just type it in and wow, you know, and I just think just in that amount of time, how
Yeah.
easy
It's
it is,
amazing.
you know?
It's amazing. Okay, good stuff. All right. A little bit more about final project, and I'll ask Greg to share a little bit about yours. Stephanie, who's going to be watching this in the future, she says in one of her blog posts, maybe she's really interested in maps, responding to grass maps and trees, as we talked about last time. Perhaps can explore how fictional literary maps, such as those from the Lord of the Rings, and I have a friend who, if he has a map in a book, it's like, that's the book, man. It's like, as soon as there's a map in it, it's like, it is written for me. But I see a map, I'm like, but specifically how the real influences the fictional, and explore it through already created digital humanities projects, the similarities and differences in narrative movement between these literary and real maps. And Brian says that he has a treat for you on Lord of the Rings with maps. Apparently there is a source, and he's not going to present it because he's going to present the Cyberpunk project, but Lord of the Rings project. So there's the Easter egg for Stephanie. And speaking of maps, can you, Greg, share with us what you were talking about doing with your final project?
Sure. So I had, of course, I get paranoid. I think that I'm going to turn in my final project, and everybody has done it this perfect way, and I have totally messed it up. So I came in and I asked Dr. Carter, I said, hey, am I going the right direction with this? You know, basically, you know, what I wanted to do is look at maybe something with Zane Grey, and what I thought was neat is Zane Grey did a lot of traveling and exploring the areas in which he wrote his novels in. And I thought, well, that's neat, but most of the people who are reading these novels don't know the areas that he's writing about. So he might write something fictional, and he did a lot of fiction. His novels were set in Utah and Arizona, a lot of them, and then other places. But so folks may not know what that looks like. But most of the people back then in the early 1900s, when he was writing, wouldn't have privilege enough to go drive out there and see it and understand what this looked like. So I thought, you know, he does a great job of inside of his novels talking about real places. And I thought, well, you know, like, Winds of the Desert or some Desert Wasteland. I forget what one of his first Western was. But I thought that it was neat. Like he talked about Lee's Ferry going across the Colorado River, you know, and the Painted Desert and things like that. And as he's going through talking about it, I don't.
Is it a ghost?
I have no idea what it is. No clue.
We'll ignore him. We will ignore you, spirits.
That's a
So-
good Easter egg too.
That's
right.
So what I thought was neat of about his 40-something Westerns, because he wrote things that weren't Western, but of his 40-something Westerns, to take and on a map put, this is where it was the setting was that he talks about where, you know, where the book was supposed to take place. And inside that, if you go and you click on it, I have embedded in different pictures of the place where, you know, I go through and find pictures like of Lee's Ferry. This is what Lee's Ferry looked like. This is what it looks like now. This is when he talks about the Painted Desert. This is what the Painted Desert looks like. Or when he talks about, if you guys ever read probably one of the most famous Westerns of all time, Riders of the Purple Sage, then he talks about Surprise Valley. And, you know, this is what Surprise Valley would have looked like. This is the cliffs and where they got stuck in there for so long and so on and so forth. And it takes it from the imagination to this is what it actually had. And I thought that would be neat. Just have some place markers on a map, you know, maybe Google's map or something, put some place markers down. And then when you click on it, the pictures pull up. So you can kind of see what it is. And I think that would be neat if someone were reading, they could click on it and say, that's what that looked like, you know, and have a visual to go with it.
I think that's great, and I have a couple of suggestions that I think would fit really well in with this assignment. And I was thinking, Danielle, does a Dubliners walking around Dublin as per the novel Digital Humanities Project exist that you know of?
I've heard of that.
It seems like it should, right? It's one city, right? Or it could be an AR thing where augmented reality where you walk. It's got GPS on it, and then you can put your phone up to this particular place that it triggers you to, and you can see an image of whatever would have been there when Joyce was writing. And so that's that augmented reality. That's that stuff Jones likes to talk about. But you could also, you can, and I was telling Greg that there are some civil rights tours, local civil rights tours that, they have the plaques and so forth, but they've supplemented it. There's one in Louisville. They've supplemented it with Google Maps. You get to a place or you're looking at Google Maps and you can click that button and it'll pop up a picture and it'll pick a little bit of an event or something like that. But there might be something to be done with overlaying these maps. I like the then and now things. So maybe there's a historic map that I know there are that you could pick that might be around that time and map it that way. But the thing that I want to tell you guys in the next few minutes is that you don't have to make the thing, just dream the thing. So in fact, I really highly recommend you don't make the thing, because the thing takes years to make. So I want you guys to dream. Don't think about you're going to read a book together that is about the tools. But as I've said from the beginning, I'm all about I guess this is the way I live life. What can it do for me? I'm not going to learn how to program. I'm not going to. I can't. Maybe it's family rebellion. I come from a family of techie people, which is why it's a little maddening that I've gotten into digital humanities and also that my husband's got me into Star Trek a little bit because they tried for all my life.
Such a good man.
He's such a good man. Oh, that's what my family says now. But there are people who do this stuff. Our job is to come up with ideas, and I'll talk to you guys about how the origin story of mine, which is a wireframe from which I developed after 3 years a prototype, which still is not a thing. It's a thing that works, and then, it did until about 6 months ago. I don't know if you guys have noticed when you're playing around with these digital humanities projects, when funding runs out, this is like a graveyard out there. This thing might be really cool, but when I punch the button to make it do the thing, it's not doing the thing. And there's nobody behind it anymore too. So that's especially true with these prototypes. But let me tell you guys a little bit about what I've tweaked here, and I'll think about it in terms of Greg's project first. So this is a startup plan, a project. So what I recommend you guys do, and I really underestimated your ambition. I'm so excited about this. Basically, a big chunk of it is going to be this, you'll still do this theorizing thing. So, for example, Greg's piece would, call upon our various scholarship that we're working with, probably draw some from Moretti with his stuff on maps, and then also draw in, this project that maps the civil rights movement, or this project that maps, as there is one that maps ghost bikes, which is apparently, it's also an AR project where cyclists are killed on the street. They'll paint a bike white and strap it to a telephone pole or whatever it is that's near the place where that happened. and take a picture of it, put it on Google Maps, and then also create an AR for it. And then it's a protest thing. And there's also one that it's an AR project, not a Google Maps project, but that is this subversive look at SeaWorld, where you go to each of the exhibitions and then you read about the carnage and horror that took place that brought this whale for your pleasure. But anyway, so there's a lot of map stuff and there's also, a lot of historical stuff, and there's stuff that deals with fictional maps, and there's stuff that deals with, like, Lord of the Rings, and there's stuff that deals with real maps, and there's stuff that is historical fiction that blends the two. So you would be saying, there are map-based projects that do X, Y, and Z, and their value is W and another letter. And there are also visualization tools, because this is essentially what it is, a visualization tool that will do X, Y, and Z, for example, and then name. My project would take blah from this kind of project, and blah from this kind of project, and then blah from this kind of project, and historical maps that are readily available from this archive, and blend them all together. And it would look something like this, and then just a PowerPoint maps plot and little, on PowerPoint maybe a little square that has a picture of what's a major event in one of your novels?
Maybe where the boulder, he pushes the boulder down to seal off, Surprise Valley.
Okay. So the Surprise Valley picture from that era, if there's one that's interesting that's in the public domain, and then a quote maybe from that section, and then an unpacking about what that would tell us something about the where that makes it relevant, or something like that. So basically, this is what it is kind of going to look like, and these are the things that I think might help, and these are the kinds of tools that I think would be relevant, and this is why I think it's important, and so forth. So this is your collective introduction. And then when you get to it, and you don't have to do it this way, this is just one way, because you can go further with this if you want. Like, you could go full on writing an NEH startup grant if you want, and I'll help you do that if you want to have an example here. But if you do this, what I'm describing with Greg's project, then you would have a curated selection of DH projects. So projects that he had referenced in his introduction, then he would show us a few of them with little annotations. And in those annotations, you would say what it does, but also what it doesn't do that your project will do. And then this annotated list of links, which is basically draws it into the scholarly conversation some more, but also the kind of journalistic conversation as well. Questions about maybe this includes, this isn't a very good one, but no one reads anymore, or some kind of this fall of Western civilization kind of thing, or maybe something about not taking Western seriously, or something like that. So it doesn't have to be directly related to entirely digital humanities, but it should be related to the project, and then a little bio. Does that make sense? Do you guys have questions? Yes, Jennifer.
I have a question. Okay. So as I said, somebody's already done like all this Beowulf stuff, but as y'all are talking about maybe Greg's project having to do with a map kind of thing, I'm sitting here wondering, would this make sense if it, there was the guy named Cotton that kind of hung on to his original Beowulf text, for years, and it just got to the museum later or whatever, and people didn't really have their hands on it for, a long time. But then, okay, so there's Beowulf, and it's super old, the oldest thing in English we have or whatever, and then there's, Canterbury Tales, King Arthur stuff, blah, blah, blah. And then, people like Tolkien get their hands on, Beowulf and teach it and study it. Anyway, so dragons, maybe, like, what if, or, maybe dragons, for instance, like what literature has been influenced by Beowulf? But then I took it another step further and I thought, what if I mapped dragon literature? Is that ridiculous?
No. Who likes dragon literature?
Okay.
We got it. We got unanimous in here.
So I would probably need to take it beyond British Lit because there's a lot of, right?
Double.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're gonna have to do what?
Like take it beyond just British Lit because there's like other dragon literature,
No, you can say my parameters are dragons in British literature. My parameters are dragons in fantasy novels written between Mystic.
Right.
My parameters are include Game of Thrones or whatever.
Right.
It's coming up soon, right? Yeah.
So then maybe there would be a way I could research like where I have proof that Beowulf would have affected that or not and make a map out of it. Does that make sense?
It does, but I don't think you have to do the first thing. I mean, that might be something that you do later with the dissertation or something like that.
Okay.
But you don't need to, with the Digital Humanities Project, at this point, prove the origin story of anything.
Okay.
If we take a page from Moretti, we're just saying, okay, let's take a bird's eye view of dragon novels.
Okay.
And again, we don't know what the problem is until we start to see them all together, and then we say, there's a big ass cluster of dragons at the point at which Beowulf becomes widely available or something like that.
Okay, awesome. Thank you.
Or maybe we find out the origin is real dragons somewhere.
Oh! That's what I want to learn, Jennifer.
I know. I better go digging for the archaeology.
But you're saying don't actually create the map itself.
Don't.
Gotcha. Okay.
I mean,
Just the idea and draw from the idea, but not.
I mean, if you're super tempted to try to do it, talk to me and I'll probably talk you out of it because what I think will happen is you will, your dream will be blunted because of the technology challenges and the time constraints. I mean, we just have a few weeks, so dream big and.
Like for your map, like the books, because like I don't know. So like if I were to click this Zane Grey book, and then a picture would be here, and then the next slide would be like if you click this one, this will show.
And you yes.
So it's not digital. It's just showing me if I click right here, then this map.
And you don't really even have to go that far. You can just show us like what one slide would look like, unless there is unless there's a function that you want your project to do that can only be seen in another slide, like it's going to do this, but it's also going to do this thing. Other questions?
I have like 9 ideas simultaneously. Like my brain hurts now. It's like
I told you Digital Humanities will break it.
Well, no, because I mean, after seeing the constellation thing, and then well, of course I saw an island that was H.G. Wells was all by himself.
That's right. That's right.
So I was like, obviously there's something. Man.
Your dissertation project just happened.
I don't.
Right, Joyce?
They're too different. They're so different. I could never. There's a few.
But I mean, where's Russia and where's the?
Oh, I didn't even do that one.
Oh, sorry, 10.
And the third game, they've been making games out of that series of Russian novels. The third one, I don't know if it's out today or it's out real soon. Reviews just went online. So that's a thing.
That's a thing. That's a thing.
Man.
Well, okay, so shall we take a little break? I can get some more water and Brian can
I don't think I can.
write some stuff down.
I don't think I can. I was going to say.
Now there be dragons. Okay, about 5 minutes. I'm going to turn finally to this project that my project that I've been talking about for a while, but I want to talk about it specifically in terms of your final project, and also like what might be another step in your final project if you'd like. As I've said, for me, digital humanities is like, what can it do for me? And I was at the time developing documentaries that I saw as remixes because they used existing archival material and they used oral histories. And I was asking my students to create video essays made out of archival materials. Many of those in our digital collections here, so about life in Northeast Texas. And, you know, letters and photographs and just artifacts that exist and that they have historical value and they have necessary context. So in a remix, if we just make a documentary, we just make a video, then those are just pictures that work together to tell a story. But every one of those pictures tells its own story, and every one of those pictures has its own historical context. And I wanted a couple of things to happen. I wanted to communicate those layers of history. That's how history happens. It's local, it's global, there's an all-at-onceness going on. But also to give people access to the materials. So, for example, if they see the desegregation speech, which I just might flash up there as I'm telling part of the story of desegregating this campus, I want to link to that speech as it exists in our digital archives, and so they can plow into that and they can, you know, look at what else is there, and new materials can be created from that. And anyway, so there's this all-at-onceness going on, you know. Where is it? When is it in the timeline? What is the artifact? Where does it exist? What's the context of the artifact? What's the context of the event? What's going on globally at the same time this is going on locally? What kinds of things are affecting one another? For example, on our campus in 68, there are a couple of groups that have been systematically and actively suppressed and repressed from public memory that were kind of radical, that had one of them influenced by the Students for a Democratic Society, which was then on lockdown at Columbia. So that very week that was going on in Columbia, our campus was giving to administrators a list of their own demands. And the administrators were responding in ways that they wouldn't be responding likely had it happened when student unrest wasn't so prevalent, had they not been stocking tear gas here like they were everywhere else. So part of the story is what was happening elsewhere. Part of the story is that 68 was a mad year with the Tet Offensive and you know, the uprisings going on in Paris. And I also wanted to tell a story that, you know, racism is not a Southern American phenomenon. It was happening in New York and all over the States, but it wasn't just happening in apartheid South Africa, but it was happening in England and all over the place. So this all-at-onceness is the story I wanted to tell. And then I ran into this. This is not scholarship. This is an artist who does remixes. And this happened like a month before the NEH grant was due. This remix culture really hates Disney. Do you know why? Does anybody know anything about copyright in Disney?
Yeah, they're really strict.
They're the worst. They're the worst, and they have had such power over copyright law and changing copyright law and taking a daycare center to court because they painted Mickey on their wall, you know, just madness. And so they like to take pot shots. And so fair use is fair use, you know, even in instances where it is fair use, they'll sick their lawyers on them. And, you know, I'm just a little guy, so, no, back off, man, I'll take it off.
Nintendo does that too. Well, they're recently slightly better, but yes, Nintendo's like that too.
Okay, so this is right at the economic crash has just happened. You can tell the guy's politics because he has mashed up Donald Duck and Glenn Beck in a Glenn Beck show. And his story is told in ways that, we've got the video source, and he does this specifically to show that this comes from a ton of different Donald Duck cartoons. And the audio source, because the audio source is Glenn Beck from a variety of different times to tell the story. He has Wikipedia that automatically fills with words that he needs to emphasize, like maybe the housing crisis or the Great Recession or whatever. And footnotes is just extra stuff that shows up. So all of this is his argument, and all of this is a bit of, excuse my initials here, but a lot of FU Disney, but also the same to Glenn Beck, but also arguments about how you just gotta pull yourself up by your bootstraps when the economy has crashed, and whose fault is it, and what are we gonna do to get out of it. So I'm not making any arguments about my politics here, but I do want to share with you guys this video.
Do you feel like you're working harder and harder these days just to stay financially afloat while fat cats get richer and richer? It's not just a feeling, and you're not alone.
The income gap between rich and poor in America is at an 80-year high. That's the largest differential since the period immediately preceding the Great Depression.
The haves are getting more while the have-nots are getting less. Meanwhile, government isn't helping decades of rising inequality.
I don't know what to do with the volume, so.
You're fired, Duck! Get out of here!
Some people have no respect for a hard-working
The Tea Party movement, the unemployment rate, the headlines.
Hello? How do you do?
Well, Mr. Duck, that's it. We've just plain run out of jobs.
Gosh, Ken. Oh my, I'm financially embarrassed.
Open the door! You ain't paid.
No, you're not that. You're kill you. I'm so discouraged. I've tried so hard.
3, 2, 1, back.
Welcome to the program. My name is Glenn Beck.
The bad news is just multiplying. Our economy is tanking. It doesn't show signs of improving. There are people losing jobs. Our government responds to the problems with bailouts, and when you call them up and say, what are you doing? You don't get any response. They're not listening to you.
I spent 70 years old.
Wall Street owns our government. How did we get here? I think a lot of people feel like they're alone and they just want to give up.
That's right.
I love my country. It is the shining example of a place where people work together in peace and friendship and worship God and make things better together.
That's right.
Well, the ideas that built America are being lost and perverted.
That is not right.
Ask yourself this one question. How many Marxist, communist, anti-capitalists do you have around you on a daily basis?
What?
The truth is that you are the defender of liberty.
Our situation is bad.
There are Nazis in America, Nazis and communists.
You have to think like a German Jew, 1934. There is a perfect storm formulating, and it is here.
We are entering a dangerous and scary time, America.
The country will be washed with blood.
These people don't mess around. They are taking you to a place to be slaughtered.
Death camp.
What planet have I landed on? It's like the damn Planet of the Apes. Did I slip through a wormhole in the middle of the night and this looks like America? We're in a dark, dark place. We've got some dark dudes coming our way.
Black Panthers, Acorn, reparations,
Welfare,
Jeremiah Wright, Van Jones,
Obama himself,
Al-Qaeda, Iran,
Islamic jihadists,
Venezuela,
immigration, Mexicans,
the refugees,
drug lords,
Hispanic groups, South America,
illegal aliens,
Mexico, Chinese. Everyone is coming.
The enemy is not only in the gates, they're inside the house.
Valientes veamos como brilla un peso.
Hola, Mex-America. It's like a pack of wild cujos ripping up the flesh of the American people. Drug lords, illegal aliens,
Mexico. They're going to start getting more and more violent.
We have been tossed into boiling water.
These people are cannibalizing us. Cannibalizing us. That's what Barack Obama is doing to the American people.
I'm hoping that the guy with horns doesn't actually show up.
Everything is about to change to the extreme, the insider extreme. We invite you to join up for $9.95 a month.
It's going to explain everything that is going on.
Insider Extreme is up and on. Hello, you sick, twisted freak, and welcome to The Extremist.
Who are you?
Isn't that a name of some stupid Disney cartoon? You can ask any question.
Oh, sucks to be you, doesn't it?
When you bought a house, you bet that you could pay it, that nothing would happen. It happened. You lost. Move on.
Boo-hoo, cry me a river. Hey, I got an idea. Listen to this.
Get a job!
Lazy slob that refuses to get off the couch and get a job.
Good riddance.
Okay, so I want to talk about this in a few different ways. First of all, neutral
No.
in any way?
No.
Okay, so what did he use to make his argument?
I liked that he was pulling in radio sources with Wikipedia sources, and that he was using the mix of the cartoons so it's something everyone could connect with. And I don't know, it almost shed a different perspective on it, even though we all are familiar with what he was saying.
The last bit right here was a note to Disney saying basically I used this right, so this is fair use. So back off, baby. And you know it's still up here. And you notice that this he used a lot for his arguments. Something that might seem benign here is this Wikipedia entry says xenophobia or nationalism or something like that. It's pointing out problems there. He's talking there about he's losing his house, and this right here is telling us facts about where the money is. So I mean, it's all has a specific point of view, and the fact that the audio source changed from outlets like the Today Show to the Glenn Beck Show was important too. Now, is he a fan of Glenn Beck? How do we know? How do we know, Jennifer?
Because he's, I guess, being like showing irony through the ridiculousness of the cartoon to the words that he's saying.
Yeah.
This is when we were snake oil.
Yes, I forgot snake oil salesman as to the $9.95 that Glenn Beck is selling his. Yeah.
Like calling out the little xenophobic extremism. I feel like I'd have to watch it several times because I was so intrigued with how quickly the video and how quickly he changed, and then the audio source. I don't even think I looked at the footnotes once. So there's just so much going on. I feel like I'd have to watch it a few times to really.
You hit on something that did not occur to me until I made the thing and started beta testing it. Yeah, there's 2 days. You think that has a lot going on. Wait till you see what we did. It's madness.
It's great, and I would watch it several times. But I guess I was so intrigued with how it was put together. And
That it makes it
dates of the different cartoons and when this would come in, and then the audio source. Well, did it match? Did it not? How he got some of those voices to like dub exactly with the movement of the hand and things like that. So I was so focused on that. I did watch the Wikipedia just a word. I didn't read it. But I didn't even look at the footnotes. Like I couldn't tell you what one of them said.
I've seen this several times, and I only recently have begun to look at the footnotes for things like in the original Donald Duck pulls a egg out of his pocket, and so the foreclosure notice had to be artistically rendered or something like
Yeah,
that.
I said modified.
Modified.
Yeah, so I would say modified. But I don't.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But there's a lot of super interesting how that's done.
So this is very common in remix culture here. Open source. This up here, this HTML up in the corner, and this blog post, as some of you guys have discovered when I've asked you guys to look at this way back when, or actually look at something way back when, no longer active, but there was all of the software or whatever it is that one needed to create this that would automatically feed Wikipedia in, and you have to create some of these things, but they're all time-stamped and they'll come up when you ask for them. It says this HTML5 video demo utilizes the Popcorn JavaScript, which is a Mozilla project framework to dynamically display source data annotations as the remix plays. Red text links to sources. So all of those were also links. And I said, wow, that's the answer to everything. I want to do that. And so I downloaded it and I said, what the hell is that? And so I sent it to academic support, and they said, I said, can we do something with this? And he said, sure. And we went do. And I said, I don't know, I'm going to put in a grant. Let's see what happens. And then we got it. And so we made this thing. And this is the prototype. So I'll show you what a wireframe looks like in a minute. But these are, we were asking these stories. This is what my scholarship's been asking for a while. And then the prototype, which I'll talk about in a minute. But look at that, how many we put in there. I'm going to play a portion of the video, the documentary that you guys saw, to show what it is that we're doing in a little bit more directly, because this doesn't all entirely sync up. But this is Google map of our campus now. This context it has bibliography, is a scholarly context that helps us understand something about what's happening right then, but within the global context of what we're trying to understand. And then the audio sources, there's music, and then there's narration on top of it. The image, this is where it appears in the database. It's an archival image. And then there's a video that runs underneath it, and a lot of that's from archive.org. And then we didn't often know what to do with footnotes, and we never figured out how to make the timeline work, so we just put dates in there.
While this is up, if for example, we were able to put together a visual like this, would this be like as far as the final project needed to go?
I can show you one better. It can be less than that. And I won't go through all of this, because this is actually for a presentation that I delivered before I'd written the thing, so before I'd recreated the thing. So it's always a campus presentation about the project before we had the project. So here's a little bit of so basically all of this is interwoven, is what I was trying to show. Oh, let me, this is based on something I just wrote recently. This is about the passing of the baton thing that happened at the Mexico City Olympics with the fist in the air. Passing the baton is what I was calling it. I want to talk about how connected everything is. Let me show you a couple of versions. This is from an article I just finished. Basically, everything's connected, and it's harder to portray that here and on the page than it is to do via digital humanities. I'm talking about how injustice happens because of justice can't exist without injustice, and injustice can't exist without the other. They just don't. There's no, that it's all connected, and none of it is ever not connected. Yeah, things like Brown versus the Board of Education, I haven't found it yet, can't exist without Plessy versus Ferguson in 1896 that said that separate but equal is here we go. I'm just talking about it, here it comes. Injustice begets justice, justice begets injustice, all fueled by the cycle of alienation embedded in the networks that at once enable and suppress any and all attempts to pass the baton. This is Marxism. For example, the Brown versus Board of Education, a decision in 1954, that separate is not equal has no meaning apart from Plessy versus Ferguson in 1896 that ruled segregation in America constitutional. Further, Plessy versus Ferguson cannot exist apart from the Louisiana law established in 1870 demanding that railroads provide equal but separate accommodations for the white and colored races, nor the civil rights movement that emerged to resist Jim Crow laws like these, nor the man who agreed to be arrested for refusing to move from a seat reserved for whites, Homer Plessy and Plessy versus Ferguson, nor even slavery itself, the Constitution, the Emancipation Proclamation, lynchings, poll taxes, and on and on. These rearticulating networks include built environments, railway stations, the earliest anti-immigration laws established to disenfranchise Chinese immigrants pouring into the country to build railroads across the country, following the westward expansion, itself made possible through the genocide, bondage of millions of people, and even seemingly benign events like the invention of the steam engine, the cultural capital, and natural resources making any invention possible, the manufacturing process, and especially the powers to control the means of production. That's, I gotta say that because of Marx. And the workers and so forth, and the political history of place, the settler colonialism, Louisiana Purchase, the people who settled the land originally, and the natural resources, and so forth. And then there's one more version of this, because Carlos attempted to make a statement about race relations on this campus publicly in the Dallas News, and that was a year before he went to Mexico City, and people didn't like that. And one last more local thing that shows these connections, but they don't show the global local connections. He told reporters things were bad, but that network of text can be traced along the reporter's path from that interview to the campus parking lot to his car and eventually his typewriter at the Dallas News offices. So from this campus there, where he sat down, typed up his report, and subsequently the article entitled Carlos Hits Prejudice, which was then routed to his editor for approval, and downstairs for layout. Eventually, Carlos's words would be printed by the thousands bound, stacked in bundles near the loading dock, packed onto trucks and into the saddlebags of children on their bicycles to be distributed to area newsstands over this 1967. Stores and homes across the region, where each copy would be ultimately retrieved from their doorsteps by readers, including eventually ET administrators and community members. The path Carlos's statement took from the interview to the hands of the ET administrators circulated through interrelated overlapping networks that included the built environment that moved that statement physically into new territories, the requisite building, roads, sidewalks, doorways, loading docks, automobiles, fuel stations, themselves some possible apartment-associated technologies. And again, you have the inventions, combustible engine, concrete high-rises, steel, oil, typewriters, the printing presses, paper, and even writing itself. Not to mention the means of production that brought these materials into existence by mining, cutting, and harvesting the necessary raw materials and transforming that. And then additional networks include public services like the creation of the Postal Service in 1792, rural mail delivery in 1891, rural electrification in 1931, farm to market roads in 37, and even the political history of the land itself, including here the forced removal of the Caddo Indians and the cultivation of this harsh clay soil by hands. And also, and on and on and on. So it's a thing that I'm obsessed with, is these connections. So just a quick little ditty on this. I won't go through all of this, but let's see. These are two apps that I really encourage you guys to look at. The Fort Vancouver mobile app. It's been around for a while, and the Cleveland Historical app. Both of those map history onto space. And this is really interesting. I think I've mentioned this before. It's an interactive role-playing game on the left called Pox in the City. Again, a map thing, set in Edinburgh in 1802, and with the invention of the smallpox vaccine. And Solo, the place that's set in the New Deal era, where you can take on the role of WPA writers like Zora Neale Hurston, Ralph Ellison, Richard Wright, or Studs Terkel as they investigate America. And they were just, WPA sent them around all over the place. Okay, so I was concerned with access, and you can see that originally I had several different, we didn't end up doing some of these documentaries. Interestingly, we really had everything we needed to do the one on the Greenville sign, welcome to Greenville, blackest land, whitest people, that hung from 1621 until the 60s. But that's still a little raw even now. Those are some pictures from our campus on the far right, some students in 1907. Those pictures are, okay. I mentioned something about remix culture. They're sort of obsessed about rights, and I wanted to combine that with the research and citation practices that we're concerned with in our world. So they've got something to learn from us. I think they don't really cite their stuff. We've got something to learn from them. They are really they're really bold about making their stuff work. So they just seemed really right, especially since I'm dealing with specific texts like that statement that Carlos made, and also the silent protest. And then because we're talking about writings and composers to create, and this is Lawrence Lessing, the guy who came up with Creative Commons, creativity and innovation always builds on the past. That means everything's a remix. And this is Ralph Waldo Emerson. All minds, quote, old and new make the warp and woof of every moment. There is no thread that is not a twist of these two strands. This is old at this point, but whoops. I'm sorry, it's so loud.
Remix. To combine or edit existing materials to produce something new. The term remix originally applied to music. It rose to prominence late last century during the heyday of hip-hop, the first popular music form to incorporate sampling from existing recordings. Early example, the Sugar Hill Gang samples the bass riff from Chic's Good Times in the 1979 hit, Rapper's Delight.
Now what you hear is not a test, I'm rapping to the beat. and me, the groove, and my friends are gonna try to move your feet.
Please have a good time. Leave your head.
Since then, that same bass line has been sampled dozens of times.
What a scene, pulling up with Jodeci, blasting up a 15. I got a good life, no stripe, real nice. And I'm a papa, my son Trey, haha.
Eu sou velho caderninho de telefone, com o nome e o número de monte de mulher. E ele vai ligar.
Skip ahead to the present, and anybody can remix anything. Music, video, photos, whatever, and distribute it globally pretty much instantly. You don't need expensive tools, you don't need a distributor, you don't even need skills. Remixing is a folk art. Anybody can do it. Yet these techniques, collecting material, combining it, transforming it, are the same ones used at any level of creation. You could.
So yeah, he says everything's a remix. I don't know if I go that far, but it's interesting. He says we can, for everything we copy and transform and combine, and he's borrowing then everything's a remix, including these ideas. He's borrowing from Edward Navas, who is borrowing from Malcolm Gladwell, who's borrowing from Grandmaster Flash, and so on. Let's see these. So this is not new, and that's why again archival materials seem to be appropriated. This didn't come about because of the internet. It goes back, William S. Burroughs and his cut-ups that he did that were a remix of earlier movements like Dadaism and their collages that happened in the teens and the 20s. But we also have, again, Ralph Waldo Emerson with this battle over shared culture. He argued that sort of everything's a remix, and this is him some more. All minds float, old and new, make the warp and woof of every moment. There is no thread that is not a twist of these two strands. Every book is a quotation, and every home is a quotation out of all forests and mines and stone quarries, and every man is a quotation from all his ancestors. And then, apparently it's all against the law. So that's one of the things that this tries to push on is the same thing, a boldness that remix culture does is like, this is fair use, so let's use it. The stuff in the archives is fair use. The stuff that is owned by the government is public domain. Our students need to know that. He says creativity and innovation always builds on the past. The past always tries to control the creativity that builds upon it, and that's necessarily because commodifying, making profits from it. And free societies enable the future by limiting this power of the past. You see how they are. Anyway, here's another really quick one. If you play this for your students, that's a couple years earlier. It's a mashup about copyright and content creation in the digital age. It's about Girl Talk, whom you may have heard of. It's everything's remixed from that. I'll just play the first part of it. And you're going to hear William S. Burroughs here. Just a minute.
Today we're going to create a mashup, a fun and adventurous way to make something fresh out of something stale.
And we heard Girl Talk
on the aesthetic and legal margins of music.
When you experiment with cut-ups over a period of time, you find that some of the cut-ups seem to refer to future events. Stop at random and cut in a phrase. And how random is random?
No question, the most insidious virus in the midst of this illegal downloading of music is
some people with some sampler glitch poppy noise. It sounds like under files. Sounds like happy up-tempo, fun poppy.
Michael Jackson had the Mounties called in to confiscate all copies of the CD.
Now, before we get our freak on, we need to match up our beats.
Cleveland, what's up? Make some noise! Is Cleveland all right tonight?
The operator on some level knew just where he was cutting in.
We won't play the whole thing, just a little bit of it.
Today we're going to create a mashup, a fun and adventurous way to make something fresh out of something stale.
Hello, my name is Greg Gillis in this cubicle, and outside of here, everyone knows me as Girl Talk.
Corporations are completely taking over our culture and telling us that we can only consume it. And we're saying no. We're saying we want to actually create with it, respond to it, take it, mutilate it, cut it up.
We're afraid he may land in jail or get sued, or we know what he does. Supposedly it's copyright infringement.
Part of what we're trying to do here is make people understand what they're doing.
Metallica was very mad about this
5 years
at the
in jail
time.
and $250,000 fine for every single song you steal.
Jackie and I are on a mission to stop piracy. That's coming in.
This is remix. This is not.
Lawrence Lessing.
They can take up to 25% of my wages to try and pay back $222,000.
Lawsuits against 10-year-olds, against stroke victims, against dead people. You can't put locks on your citizens.
Disney lawyers have taken aim at this Florida daycare center, saying it has no right to use Disney characters on its wall.
Basically, we have a mouse disease. Artists inflicted with this impulse to draw your stupid mouse.
I think that what's happening with copyright is the same thing that happened with masturbation. That people are starting to admit to each other.
Cory Doctorow, that's great.
Everyone's just going to keep getting more and more extreme with protecting their own ideas. I think eventually everyone's going to realize that it's beneficial to share ideas.
O compartilhamento é a própria natureza da criação. There's no way to kill this technology. We can only criminalize its use. If this is a crime, then we have a whole generation of criminals.
All this stuff makes me want to download a movie.
So I'll stop there, but the last thing I want to show you, and I'll do it really quickly, is this is the same story in different ways, that it's just that it's a common thing, and so the art will show it as well. This here, Martin Luther King, and in the context it says something about the tensions that are not really there. This is from some race riots that happened in Leaventon, Pennsylvania.
The whole thing centers around the word
and this story happening that is also in Pennsylvania.
East Texas State University began the process of desegregation in 1964.
And then
that summer, then University president and outspoken segregationist James G. Gee called together all faculty and staff to announce ET's immediate compliance with civil rights legislation mandating desegregation. What happened next?
Yeah. Oh, thank you. My husband said, "That's a great voice."
If, as Martin Luther King argued in 1958, segregation led to hate based on fear resulting from the unknown, perpetuated by
And this video that we returned to several times, and that I returned to several times, is written by the guy that made I can't even think of the name of it. But those chairs, those expensive fancy chairs, he's got a series of videos that I just think are fascinating. Anyway, this video about communications was shown at one of the first 4 C's, and so that would have been something that we talk about in the context. And so all of these overlays and the ways in which these artifacts exist and don't exist in the backdrop of all of these and their connections over time, it tries to explode all of that, which is what remix culture does. And also by exploding all of that, it attempts to make it all as accessible and as sort of forcefully accessible as remix culture does. Basically, it's out there, make new stuff out of it. So Girl Talk takes all of this music and just cuts thousands of tracks to make this music. And remix culture, Lawrence Lessing, copyright law protections have significantly backed off, based in part on these movements, which makes our work easier. But anyway, that's that stuff. Really quickly, so that we can get into you guys' rhetorical crises. I want to tell you guys a little bit about this dude. Moving on to graphs, maps, and trees. Okay, this guy is an odd bird. So we've been talking about, and we've already gotten here, I think, the tensions between the sciences and the humanities, and the tensions, I think, between popular culture and the humanities, which is something we see in Jones's emergence to the digital humanities and what I was trying to draw from in remix culture. And so digital humanities combines the sciences and the humanities, and we've been looking at some newer examples that you deal with, visualization tools like these mapping Islamophobia. Some of these take really heavy computing power though. And so Moriarty's does tons of stuff that he's working with. And we spoke about this last time, but this is sort of an example of kind of where somebody was asking, so when did it really start? Well, it really sort of just depends. I would say probably with Father Busa in the late 40s. But he's what can computing power do to help us understand what's going on? So he says, the traditional way to deal with reading text is, of course, close reading, right? That's what we're trained to do. That's what all of us are trained to do. Gatsby's, the Great Gatsby, what's the meaning of the books that he has in his library, that the fact that they're uncut, what do we get from that? The fact that they're unread. Or the green light that hangs at the end of Daisy's dock. Gatsby brought this house so they could see the light, but the point is its unattainability. Gatsby believed in the green light. This is from the book. Gatsby believed in the green light. The orgastic future that year by year recedes before us. It eluded us then, but that's no matter. Tomorrow we will run faster, stretch our arms out farther. And so, we've got tons of things we can think about with this. It depends on the lens that we have, that we work with, but maybe the symbol is his love for Daisy. That seems pretty likely, of hope, but the symbol is more important than what it symbolized, because once it's realized, it sort of loses its allure maybe. And, maybe the green light's the American dream, that disconnect between old and new money. And maybe the American dream and its unattainability is the point, because its essence lies not in the attainment of the dream, but in our desperate attempts to. And I just keep thinking of George Jetson running on the treadmill. Jane, stop this crazy thing. So he says more computing, less reading, not close reading, but what he calls distant reading. Get away from the individual text in those case studies and see what happens when we read tens of thousands of novels at once rather than line by line. He says that's deliberate reduction and abstraction, which he says yields historical patterns through artificial constructs, those graphs, those maps, those trees. That is graphs, the quantitative history, quantitative data, numbers. Input is this large scale data, and we have to talk some about where that data comes from too. And the maps, which we talked about some last time, which I hope we'll talk about now too. And we still have time next time to talk about trees. So in the graphs, he's looking at the shifting popularity of different genres, those village narratives we talked about in the maps, the detectives fiction in Britain and Japan, and comparisons across continents and over time. And once there are dips and spikes, he tries to see, okay, so what might be happening at that time politically? Well, politically doesn't exactly make that clear. We don't quite understand that. We'll all explain it, and what else is happening. So in the maps, the boundaries that shape the narrative is plotted from the perspective of the character, how the character makes their way through space. I showed you guys last time Bechdel's book, Fun Home, and the way she uses those maps. They're very confined. She has a map in this graphic novel of her father's life, where he lived and where he was born and where he lived and where he grew up and then where he died, all within this tiny little space. And in the house on Mango Street, I mocked up something which I can show later. I'm teaching that. We just finished that this week. I found myself, I've never done this before at any time I've ever read this, but drawing a map, you know, here's her house and here's Kathy's house and here's, and then at one point she takes a bike ride and she goes by, she goes down to this dangerous area, she calls it, which takes her by the corner store and then the laundromat and then the junk store and past some cars that are broken down. And then she loops back and she's back on Mango Street. So, you know, we got another circle. And there's a story within that too. And then the trees, he's using evolutionary biology that way by looking at how deducing from the form of an object, the object being here the novel, the forms that are worked on, and he's talking about the subgenres being the object and those outside forces that we're working with. Okay. Just this really quickly, and then let's talk more about these rhetorical crises. This is from Adventures of a Man of Science. It's really useful, and I think you probably run into that some in your graphs, maps, and trees. It's from, this guy, this is a former student at Stanford who says that Moretti's concepts have all the irresistible magnetism of the diabolical, especially when delivered in lecture form. He says, imagine the charming Italian accent, the amiable panache with which he pulls out yet another overhead transparency, graphing, say, the rate of increase in gross annual novel production in Spain versus Nigeria. It is rumored that in a talk on the novels from the periphery of world literature, Moretti claimed to have read only the introductions. He doesn't read the damn things. And then, during a Q&A session, a professor from the Spanish department tricked Moretti into betraying his knowledge of such details from an obscure Argentinian novel as could have only been known by someone who had actually read the whole thing. And he said, I don't know, maybe I read it on a plane or something like that, but he insists that he doesn't read these things. So he's this mythic figure. It's said that he apparently hired 5 graduate students just to retype the first paragraph of every Victorian novel ever written. Oh my gosh. And he's actually co-authoring a book on morphology with a team of Canadian ornithologists, the branch of science that studies birds. What the hell? He doesn't believe in word count, apparently. He prefers instead to calculate the average number of characters per word in his students' papers, and anyone with an average of 6 or higher gets an F. And then this one, he overheard 2 of his classmates at a department party, drinks in hand, debating the question of Moretti's office hours. I wonder whether he'll be in this Friday when used the first student. I need to show him my reading list. The second student says, I happen to know that he's going to be on campus at midnight on Wednesday to be teleported to Sweden. Teleported to Sweden, she said. Nobody even raised an eyebrow. Indeed, the image glides easily before the mind's eye in a moonlit Stanford quad before the fake Spanish church under the gigantic reproduction of Rosselli's Last Supper. Franco Moretti shimmers briefly into the ether and rematerializes that very instant in Uppsala. I just love this crazy guy. So literature is not a sum of individual cases, which is how we've been studying it, but a collective system. And he's talking about literary sociology, the means of deducing from the form of an object the forces that have acted upon it, which we mentioned before. And the reviewer says that he brings the science fiction thrill to the science of fiction. He says, like the first photographs of Earth taken from outer space, and that's a great story unto itself. It's the old territory, but it's rendered almost unrecognizable by these perspectival leaps that we haven't never seen before. So we talked about graphs already and what he does there, and we talked a bit about maps here. Sarah's post reminds me that. This quote from the idea of landscape in the sense of place, 1730 to 1840, on that open field parish geography. For those of its inhabitants who rarely went beyond the parish boundary, the parish itself was, so to speak, the center of the landscape. for those inhabitants accustomed to moving outside it, however, and for those travelers who passed through it, the parish was defined not by some circular system of geography, but a linear one. And then, and we can come back to, okay, so the question of trees is something that we want to talk about next time. How can we understand the survival of Sherlock Holmes as opposed to the failure or other fictional devices of his time? The answer, the writer of other detective fiction did not know how to use clues. And a lot of the reading graphs, maps, and trees had some things to say about that. So I would like to talk about those. So who wants to go first with their retort? You want to go first with your perspective?
Sure. You want the reading graphs, maps?
Yes, please.
So in a move that will surprise nobody, I took the brief note on Moretti in science fiction. Right. You want me to just read it?
Yes, that sounds good.
Adam Roberts, in the article A Brief Note on Moretti in Science Fiction, suggests that science fiction's persistence as a genre challenges Moretti's assertion about the impending death of such genres. Roberts supports his claim by expanding the origins of science fiction from the earliest accepted example, which is Frankenstein in 1818, to include Kepler's Somnium in 1634. Then traces the genre through its major movements through to the present, careful to include modern multimodal editions of comic books and movies before returning to an overview of the genre. The author's purpose is to illustrate the reluctance of the science fiction genre to die, which might be said to challenge Moretti, though it has to be noted that Roberts couches his argument by closing with the note that a map of his genre divisions would mirror a graph from Moretti. The author writes in a conversational tone for general audiences.
Okay, so what can you fill in for us on that?
Well, I mentioned last time briefly with when we done graphs, the problem was he seemed to be given genre 25-year lifespan. And reading a genre that's lasted longer than that, it can make you feel like yours is on the cusp of dying any given moment, because there's compelling evidence in his graphs that there's like, here's all these genres and here's them basically falling off a cliff, like they're gone now.
Right.
So it's kind of inevitable. You can get the sense that it's inevitable, but this particular genre hasn't turned into anything else. It's science fiction is still science fiction. Now the divisions, they recur too. I mean, as he has them here. Utopias, he's got in the 1880s to the 1910s, and then he's got them again. What did he say? Wiggle room, subjectively. 1915. He says at the very, very end of his, when it goes back to prose after this list.
Okay.
A little further. Right there, he says, plenty of utopias were written after 1950. He doesn't discuss dystopias at all. They're not listed at all, and I'm used to treating them as their own sort of subgenre. But what he did was he said is longer than the accepted, because there's two. There's Frankenstein and there's Gernsback, the 20s. Those are the two kind of accepted starts of science fiction. He says, no, it's way further than that, so it's even longer. He never comes right out and says this is meant to challenge this, but it's very easy to imply that's the point. But my gripe with it is he says at the very end, he's like, yeah, and if you took all this thing that I made and graphed it, it would look just like this book. Well, no, don't say that at the end. Wait till other people say it and then write your article refuting what they said. Don't give them the article to write.
Yeah, good point.
But he was also, and it probably should be noted, plugging a book he had just finished.
Oh,
when he was writing this. He says something like, I won't get into it here, it's in my book, blah, blah, blah.
Trailer.
Oh, okay.
Available at Amazon for, yeah. Okay, excellent. Who's next? Okay, Jennifer, do it.
John Holbo in an excerpt entitled Judging Books by Their Covers, or Chance Favors the Prepared Meme. It's in French, that word is meme. Anyway, okay. Included in the book, Reading Graphs, Maps, and Trees argues that Franco Moretti may have overlooked certain elements, such as luck, in his book. Holbo asserts that books are sold to customers who haven't yet read them. Therefore, Moretti's Graphs, Maps, and Trees, I didn't mean that as a title, I meant actual graphs and maps and trees, are missing several components. The author uses examples of other driving forces to promote book purchase reading, such as the attractiveness of the cover, shelf placement, which honestly, do we always bend over to find the M's when, I don't know. Involvement of Oprah, which was funny.
Well,
yeah. Or social necessity of reading the popular book of the time rather than pretend to some data set at my fingertips, see postscript for the data set that turned up later, let me dogmatically opine that J.K. Rowling is lucky. More on that in a minute. But Hobo writes in a witty tone to Moretti and their peers to enhance the conversation regarding what components make literature successful. So, okay, back to the J.K. Rowling thing. That lucky aspect that he's talking about is basically what my 13-year-old said to me earlier this year. I have to read Harry Potter if I'm not, going to know what's going on with my friends, and
social chloride.
Yes. So, and of course, yeah, he's hooked on it and loves it. And he has a friend, my best friend's son in England, that he, reads, and then that's the only thing they have to talk about. They really don't have anything else in common. They don't even live on the same continent, but it's that Harry Potter that connects them. So basically, this author is saying that J.K. Rowling could have been anybody. It just so happened that she got lucky, and it was she who was chosen amongst the millions of science fiction for kids, or not science fiction, but whatever. That is that science fiction, I guess.
Fantasy, I think.
Fantasy, yeah, fantasy. Okay, so yeah, basically, luck and those other forces is, those are the components that Moretti's not taking into account. I don't know. Do y'all agree with that, or?
Makes sense to me. What do you guys think?
Well,
I don't
Oprah
disagree.
has her own kind of magic, so anything that she's endorsing.
Oh, I love it.
Yeah.
The Sherlock example, there's the other guy, I forget his name, did the Raffles novels. There was a competing detective type book. It's just he was lucky and he's the one who stuck around. I mean, I don't know that it's more complicated than that.
Sometimes some people have better agents. Some people have, that's very important too. Yeah, she androgenized her name.
That's back C.L. Moore, James Tiptree. I mean, pen names and abbreviations. That's
Long history of that. That is important.
Yeah, you should.
I believe in that. I read a Western named Claire Huffaker, and I thought, there's no way a lady is going to picture what a man thinks the West should be. And I started loving it, and I'm like, well, I was wrong, And then come find out it was a man named Claire, but
I see.
So, I think maybe we do get drawn into those thoughts, unnecessarily.
Yeah. This was perpetually a question that I had through. I didn't think about the popularity of it. That makes a lot of sense. And the involvement of Oprah in anything makes a lot of sense. But who has access to the working poor? Probably not writing, right? There are some slave writings, but they're uncommon for a million different reasons. And even if things get written, are they going to be published? And even if they get published, are they going to be considered valuable enough to preserve? And on and on and on. Now, he's very clear. He says he's talking about the canon. He's not making these other arguments. But, it's kind of hard too to make arguments about the canon when so few genre pieces are a part of the canon. Thank you, Jennifer. Do we have others for this week? Abigail, do you want to do yours?
Mine was just a very general overview of both of them because I kind of read them both at the same time.
Okay. Well, give us your overview. Then you don't have to read this. You want to just give us a bird's eye view of what you were talking about?
I really thought it was very interesting the way the reading graphs, maps, and trees, pulled everything together. Just all the different people that they got to talk about it, and not just the book, but the author and the way his personality and everything factored into his perspective of it, which is the way I tend to look at a lot of things. So I thought it was really helpful for me to read. And just particularly the different, they weren't all going at it on the same, I guess, topic. They were all picking something just a little bit different. And it was interesting to see one book that was about the same thing, but was also about a group of totally different things at the same time.
Yeah, excellent. I'm glad it exists too. Okay, and that's it. Okay, then we have this one is this one from debates?
Yeah.
Okay, all right. Hit us with one of those, and then I've got a little bit more to say about, oops, sorry.
That's all right, I got it.
Okay.
I can just read it. Amy E. Earhart and Tonisha L. Taylor in the article Pedagogies of Race, Digital Humanities in the Age of Ferguson argue that removing some of the barriers to digital humanities projects can empower undergraduates and the public to engage in such a project like they have seen in their own white violence, Black resistance. Earhart and Taylor support their thesis by chronicling the prevalence of social media posts around police violence that popped up organically after Ferguson and other events, showing a connection between historic events as far back as the 19th century that involved racial violence, and cite student statements of gratitude for having been a part of such a project in their education. The author's purpose is to educate the academic community of ways that they have tried to democratize digital humanities projects to suggest others might do the same. The authors write in formal language for an educated audience.
Okay.
The other thing I'd add here is that they get into programs that they try to use and how it's free to use if you run your own server, but it costs money if you house that data elsewhere. And they call out their university for having a policy that prohibited their use of it. And that made me think, like, are they fired now? Like, is this kind of thing? Because we're hearing all the time about how you have to watch, and they're publishing like there were limitations here, so we had to work around, right? So that kind of made me nervous reading it.
Yeah.
But,
the internal politics are definitely real and complicated, for sure. For sure. Okay, I think we spoke some about maps last time. I'd kind of like for us to talk about trees, but before I do that, I want to share. I love the way Stephanie Franklin here. She's talking about maps. She says she doesn't love maps in a blog post entitled "Taking Up Space." Honestly, maps aren't exactly something I'm passionate about, but I've been finding myself really appreciating space, how we use space, how we take space, and how we, just as people connected through one class, are relative to each other in this space. The movements involved, the paths traveled, the potential that exists. So for her, that chapter on maps just clicked. It goes back to what I mentioned in a bit about my final project, which I mentioned earlier. The space on a map can reveal so much, even if it's just questions to investigate further. When you start to pin figures or events on a map and see where paths trace to, you find a new perspective, you appreciate the life of the text so much more. It's nice, isn't it? I love the idea of taking up space.
while we're on maps still, perhaps I'm missing something. If there aren't any kind of rules for this, right? Moretti's basically saying you map it as you, because somebody gave me the example in class about mapping, what was it? What book is that? Kill a Mockingbird, where they would run and you could draw out where the children would run versus where they would walk. And that helped me conceptualize how one might draw a map for a text they were interested in. And that's okay? Like, you just kind of do it?
Well, my sense of why Moretti's book is important is not because he's really given us parameters whereby we can do this kind of work. He's just kind of given us permission to do this kind of work. He's working from different logic sets, but what you're doing, that makes sense to me, and I don't think that it runs counter to what he's arguing. What do you guys think?
I just thought, and I kind of touched on this in my blog post, like, the first time I read through that whole map thing, like, I kind of got it, which is kind of where I'm at with the trees thing right now, to be honest.
Mm-hmm.
But I think, as far as, like, permission, I think it's just interesting, like, the permission really is just to give yourself a different way to view the information. Even, I don't know, just thinking of it in a different way, like not looking for the same thing that you usually would. More than, I don't know, I guess I thought about that more than like the actual physical map that is drawn.
Mm-hmm.
I started to think of it like, I guess I started thinking like the visual of the family tree and how things are connected. And then I took that and put it into how he tries to connect things that way. It helped it flow a little bit, but it was a little bit, I guess not as quick to come to me as the map piece of it.
Yeah, I'm having trouble graphing. Oh, okay, let me use a different verb. I'm having trouble verbing the choice to use the Sherlock Holmes clues example with evolution. Apparently, literary evolution is a thing that has existed in the study of literature at least almost as soon as Darwin did his thing. They started looking at the ways that literature changes over time, and now we have the computing power to kind of look at it. So I can see it in terms of like throwing a bunch of data together. We've got what? Let me see. I've got the numbers here for the graphs. We've got something like 62,000 novels. Yeah. So the canon has in the 19th century British novel 200 titles, and but there are I don't know, thousands, tens of thousands, and so he uses computing power. We know this to graph. Okay, when did genres subside? When do they move up and back and so forth? So we can trace all that, and I think we've got that right. I mean, graphs show us the rises and the falls and the desolations and so forth. But in the trees, I think he's trying to get into the trees a little bit more. And we've got I don't know crap about it, evolutionary biology, right? But we've got I'm a certain kind of animal. I'm just living through time, that great thing, and then oops, something changed, and so now I'm going this way. I don't know. I mean, I was several different kinds of I don't know, what are the different kinds of humans that we had, and then so that we become one and we go down one tree, or all the dinosaurs are extinct, and now we have just birds that are moving through. So he's just looking at the ebbs and flows of specifically detective novels, specifically Sherlock Holmes, and specifically because this genre is known for clues, how they use clues, right? So let me get that book out. So somebody make sense of this for us, because that's as far as I get. I can get further.
Gathering that, like, he's basing his trees around a central aspect that he's noticed, or that he's like, okay, well, detective fiction, one of the things that's common is clues, or we assume it's clues, and so maybe he started with that and then started looking for that aspect to see if the contemporaries had clues as well. gives him that story started. Because he said it's part of a larger project that he was involved with. So
I'm going to make a total guess. If you took detective novels as a branch and you talked about all the little pieces coming off of it as different things people who wrote detective novels included, it might account for how the genre diverges, because he talked about the way languages change and language trees, and that was something at least I was semi-familiar with. So maybe as a metaphor.
Yeah, trees is biology, is life, right? It's a life. We go from various statistical, from this date to this date, this is what happened. This date to this date, it just kind of takes on its own.
Right, and it's important that other outside factors push against it to make these changes. So, different plant life emerges as land emerges, and different marine animals emerge and don't, and also as we pollute the planet, different things start to happen. And so, in that first chapter, he was talking about political things that happen that might have, made for the ebbs and flows of certain changes in certain countries at certain times, but also social things that were happening, and he talks less about the material things that were happening. One of the things I was thinking of when he was talking about I was thinking of the grass, but I was also thinking about the trees, is I'll talk about that next time because it's a deep one. It's interesting. So put a pin in that. Okay, so he's talking about fingerprints and clues. So that fingerprints and clues is assumed as central importance in this third chapter, and that's the morphological trees. And he's looking at two literary devices: clues in detective fiction and free and direct discourse in the novel. And so he says the trees are designed to apply to Darwin's laws of evolution to the history of literature. So if we look at figure 28 at the bottom, he's always got these dense, really interesting quotes. This was from Darwin. Let A be a common, widely diffused and varying species belonging to a genus large in its own country. The little fan of diverging dotted lines of unequal lengths proceeding from A, they represent its varying offspring. Only those variations which are in some way profitable will be preserved or naturally selected. And here the importance of the principle of benefit being derived from divergence of character comes in, for this will generally lead to the most different or divergent variations represented by the outer dotted line being preserved and accumulated by natural selection. So I'm thinking in terms of again, the birth and death of different novels. Let's see if I have a good example here. So on page, well, I guess it's 19, figure 9, the British novelistic genres from 1740 to 1900. We have a series of genres that grow and then dissolve. The courtship novel disappears in the maybe 1825. The picaresque novel dies a lot earlier, and then some of these don't become a part of anything until, like the anti-Jacobin novel doesn't come about until the late 1700s, which makes sense because that's the French Revolution, right? The evangelical novel comes about the time that we think of the what's that called? The Second Awakening. Military novels come and go. We think if we're looking at it during times of war, and so on. Utopian, dystopian novels seem to emerge. He doesn't have any dystopian novels, but they seem to emerge in particularly bleak times. So these are external factors that made these choices happen. And he's looking at, in the maps chapter, he's looking at narrative choices that can be placed in space, but here he's looking at some kind of plot choices that where we can see the changes go. So The tree of clues shows the presence or the absence of clues to be the determining factor in the survival of a detective story in the turn of the century literary marketplace. So if you do the clues right, then your book sells, which, you know,
it looks like even that is in an evolution phase, right? First starts off as being present, and then necessary, and then just visible, and then decodable, and then even simultaneously, Doyle has some of his stories don't have clues at all. It has the negative, I think, on the tree, right?
Yeah, can you show us which one that one is?
This is still that figure 30. On the left side, I marked it like there's a, like towards the top, you can see, I think it's the second tier from the top, where a large majority are Doyle, you know, and they have no clues there, right? I'm guessing that's the minus sign. And if you look at like Bolden, I think Roller, you can see him there, but one tier down on the right, he has clues in his anonymous letters. They're necessary. So it's almost like the idea of clues is evolving too. You know, as it's branching out, it's becoming less necessary, just visible. And that he even mentions Moriarty that certain authors like use the clues, but they don't use it correctly.
That's a big thing, and he says that's when they die because they're doing it incorrectly, which is interesting too. And I'm thinking about what's popular because, you know, I'm thinking about prestige television, for example. Our readers and watchers, we're sort of trained by the culture that we take into. I mean, like, we get better at clues, right? We get better at more complex television right now. We know the tropes, so we know what to expect. So I understand why it would be on all on the author to do it right or wrong. And but yeah, I think that's useful.
He used them sometimes, and other times there's a lot of stories where he doesn't use them, but he's still successful.
Yeah. So what's to be said about that?
It's just an association. If you've done it, like if you release one record and your band is associated with this particular sound, and it's the only one that sounds like that, it doesn't matter. You are associated with that sound. It doesn't matter if he used clues in every single story. He's associated as the one who did it correctly. So it doesn't even matter if it's present in 40% of them.
And that's the bottom of the tree on the right side. It's Doyle, you know, on one side, and his contemporaries on the other. And then as you move up, he's on both sides. You know?
So like knock them out.
Yeah, on both sides.
Yeah, just as a certain morphological feature might determine the survival of a living species in a given environment, the same kind of thing with the clues. In Moriarty's second tree, various international novelists are distributed on the right or the left-hand branches, depending on whether their use of that free and direct discourse tends to be more direct, more towards the second and first person. We can talk about that next time. But I did love his examples about how they use them wrong. Some rivals omitted clues altogether in favor of such alternative truth-dividing devices as dreams or unsolicited confessions, which is my favorite, Angela Lansbury. I'm a big fan of the old school Perry Mason, where they say it on the, do you watch that too? They always say it on the stand, I did it. Or somebody in the audience will say, I did it, and I do it again. A chance autopsy of a shark, which turns out to have swallowed a message in a bottle that mentions the identity of a true killer. So like this bizarre stuff. And then other rivals who did include, so some didn't include clues at all. Some of them included them in the wrong place. Thus, one detective having deduced that the drug is in the third cup of coffee proceeds to drink the coffee. So given that, I don't know, we should talk next time about what it is that what are we learning from this? I mean, I'm learning like new ways to think about literature. I'm learning new ways to sort of possible ways that I can take questions and concerns and rethink them. And I love the idea of thinking them in terms of evolution, but but let's talk more about his examples. Any final words on Moretti? Okay, we will spend a little bit of time on trees next time, just to wrap that up. But I think we'll start with the emergence of the digital humanities next time. Well, actually, rhetorical précis on reading, and then trees, and then we'll go to emergence of the digital humanities. So we don't have kitty cat, so we don't miss that. Okay. Any final questions before next week?
Well, we just want to say happy Valentine's Day to our digital humanities teacher.
Thank you, and I'd like to say happy Valentine's Day to you guys. My husband got me a lovely card this morning. I'm going to have to go by the store on the way home because I definitely got one. It was just sitting there waiting for me this morning. I thought, oh my God, he's ahead of time. No, it's the 14th today. All right, guys, thank you so much. I will see you next time.